This is a car that enthusiasts in India have been waiting eagerly for years. It is of course the Volkswagen Golf GTI, and by now you probably know quite a bit about it. We did do an in-depth review of the Golf GTI, but that was at the Natrax test track. And now we finally got it out here in the real world to see how it deals with real world challenges such as speed breakers and potholes, and of course we'll also see what its performance is like. So let's get to it.
Starting off with perhaps the most interesting bit, the performance.
With 265 horsepower and 370 Newton meters on tap from this 2-liter TSI turbo petrol engine, the Golf GTI of course is really quick. In our performance test, we managed to clock a 0 to 100 kph time of just 5.73 seconds, and that's over half a second quicker than the Mini Cooper S. We even managed a sub 14 second time in the quarter mile run, and it is potent in gear 2. Here's a quick look at all the acceleration figures. Now with all that power being channeled to just the front wheels, of course there's some torque steer present, but it never feels unnerving. In fact, it actually adds to the driving experience and makes it feel even more entertaining. What also adds to the experience is the exhaust note in sport mode. Sure, it's piped through the speakers, but it does sound really good, and it also lets out an occasional crack and pop on the downshift, which sounds really good. So in normal everyday city driving, this 2-liter TSI is refined, chilled out and very docile. But if you want performance and that quick burst of acceleration, you know you have 265 horses under your right foot and it just explodes to life. And what I really like is that it's not a very linear power delivery. There is a prominent step up in performance, and that just adds to the whole experience.
But that's just in a straight line. What's it like around corners?
Being a front-wheel drive, you'd expect some understeer around the bends in the Golf GTI. But it is very well contained and you can barely even notice it thanks to that clever electronic differential. Sometimes, in fact, you can even feel it pulling you inside to take a tighter line around the corner. And if you do drive it hard enough, you can even induce some oversteer, which is quite entertaining. It's also very eager to turn in thanks to this quick steering. The steering is light at lower speeds, but it does pick up weight in a very progressive manner, which does add to your confidence when you're pushing around bends, and it makes you want to drive even harder. The GTI hugs corners like few front wheel cars do. There's barely any body roll to speak of, and on the whole, yeah, it feels like an absolute hoot to drive around some twisty roads.
But not everyone who buys this car will be reserving it just for weekend drives on good roads. The Volkswagen will also have to be capable in the daily grind.
Measuring around 4.3 meters in length, 1.7 meters in width with a 2.6 meter long wheelbase, the Golf GTI is around the size of a Hyundai Creta, but of course in a hatchback form. So it does feel more manageable and easier to drive. What's also good is that you get a great view out of the cabin. There aren't any blind spots, so you can place the car exactly where you want, and that's a big boon in city traffic. One thing that you have to keep in mind in bumper-to-bumper traffic is that the creep function can feel a little too strong. So you have to keep your foot on the brake and modulate it constantly, but you do get used to it over time. In fact, even the throttle can feel a little too sharp initially, but you do get used to it, and in fact you'll appreciate it later as it makes closing those gaps in traffic and darting in and out of gaps really easy.
Eco mode does dull throttle response slightly, but it can still feel a bit too sharp for the uninitiated. Parking is also easy. There isn't a 360-degree camera, but the rear view camera is good enough, and what helps matters are the front parking sensors.
With a ground clearance of 136mm, you'd think it'll have a tough time clearing speed breakers, as I'm approaching one right now. But if you're really careful, it's really not an issue at all. Though it's worth keeping in mind that when the car is fully loaded, you can scrape the belly on some of the really large speed breakers. The Golf GTI is also surprisingly capable at tackling bad roads so long as you're really careful. Sure, it does get jittery and you get a bit of vertical movements at lower speeds, but that's expected from a hot hatchback. You expect this kind of firm setup which rewards you in the corners.
The GTI sits on large 18-inch alloys and the stiff suspension setup means that you do feel large bumps inside the cabin. On really bad sections, you have to exercise caution, but on the whole, you'd be surprised as to how well it absorbs bumps. And that's especially impressive considering the India spec model doesn't come fitted with dynamic chassis control, via which one can soften or stiffen the suspension.
So on the whole, yes, the GTI is a car that you'd enjoy more on night drives and on some weekend runs, but it can easily do the duty as your daily driver as well. The GTI's cabin is a practical place, so you get a sizable glove box, you get large door bins, you get two trays here for your smartphones, two large cup holders, and there's space under the center armrest as well. Other than that, I really like the GTI flourishes this cabin comes with, so you get red detailing all around. I really like these seats which are upholstered in Alcantara and this tartan fabric upholstery. It looks really cool and it holds you in place around the bends. And you also get sporty metal pedals and this flat bottom steering with the GTI logo, all of which adds a bit of spice to the cabin. At the back too, you get large door bins which can easily hold large water bottles. There are seat back pockets with special slots for your smartphone, so that's really nice. There's also a fold down armrest with cup holders and you also have USB Type-C charging ports.
Speaking of the back seat, can the Golf GTI fit in 3 passengers? The rear seat space in the Golf GTI is somewhere between a compact and a mid-size SUV. There's actually sufficient leg and headroom and you aren't sitting knees up as well. But this is best for 2 as it's short on width and there's a huge transmission tunnel in the center.
The boot volume is 380 liters, and while that might not seem like a lot, it's actually a properly usable space and it can easily swallow up your luggage for a weekend, as you can see here. What's also nice is that the loading lip isn't too high and the opening is wide, so you can fit in items quite easily.
And since it doesn't get a spare tire, there's even more space under the boot floor to store some soft bags. And you can even split and fold the rear seat for even more room. So yes, the GTI is practical too. Now let's take a look at its features.
The GTI does come well equipped with things like this large 12.9-inch touchscreen that's slick to operate and easy to navigate. You also get this 10.25-inch digital instrument cluster that's highly customizable. You get a 3-zone climate control, a sunroof, a wireless phone charger, and some other things. But some of the options that are available in Europe haven't been ticked for India. Things like a 9-speaker Harman Kardon audio system, leatherette upholstery, electric adjust for the seats, and seat ventilation. In fact, this gets seat heating since it's a UK spec car. And yes, if it did have those options, it would have just upped the feel-good factor even more. In terms of safety also, you're well covered. You get 7 airbags and ADAS features like autonomous emergency braking, adaptive cruise control, and lane keep assist. But since it's a CBU and a UK spec car, the ADAS features do feel a little too sensitive and intrusive for our road conditions. So what I like to do is turn them off the moment I get into the car, and you can do that via this nifty shortcut in the center console. But a downer is that you have to turn them off every time you get into the car.
It's worth mentioning though, the next batch of GTIs being imported will get a spare tire and keyless entry.
Priced at Rs 50 lakh ex-showroom, the Golf GTI is expensive, and considering that it misses some feel-good features and the fact that it is a hatchback tips the scales further away from it. But then again, this is not a rational buy. This is something that you buy with your heart over your head. And in that sense, the Golf GTI delivers in spades. The Golf GTI is meant to be fun and emotional, and that it definitely is. So if that's something that you're after, then yes, this hot hatchback is definitely worth it.